Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic, What If Naruto Was Raised by Team Minato Part 2. If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start. Chapter 3. A Storm Avoided. Fugaku was sitting at the table thinking about a string of inquiries levied against the military police by Danzo. Accusations of members committing abuse of authority, unlawful assault of Konoha citizens and shinobi, and outright treason claiming that the clan assisted with releasing the Kyuubi. The last one was kept behind closed doors due to the sensitive information involved. He cited just how petty the man had become after Obito called him out in the middle of the council chamber in front of all the clan heads and the civilian members. It seemed that Danzo was trying to provoke a reaction from the Uchiha to justify his stance and regain his public image. Everywhere Fugaku or anyone who bore the clan name Uchiha looked or went, stood the root drones observing them to report to their master, the one-eyed bastard. Though the internal clan problem that was proving to be as big of a headache as the one-eyed cripple was the Uchiha clan elders. The wrinkled old bastards had been attempting to stir up trouble trying to rally the Uchiha to take over the village. They had lived during the time of Senju Tobirama, the second Hokage, who was harsh in his treatment of the Uchiha but was far fairer in his treatment of their clan than his student Danzo. Tobirama would have given them a chance to prove their innocence. Danzo would want to elevate the severity and force a guilty verdict to wipe them out. Or perhaps, if taking root into consideration, simply kill every Uchiha who could not be completely reprogrammed, and simply destroy the clan on identifying level. Keeping simply those who could be programmed into Danzo's view of Konoha. Yes, the elders did have a point that the Uchiha had been locked and restricted to the military police, but it made sense considering the standard skill set possessed by an Uchiha, and it was becoming apparent that those in power were beginning to open up to changing that regulation. And it also seemed the elders had a self-serving memory when it came to the history of the warring states. Otherwise they would remember how many of Tobirama's brothers had been killed by Uchihas that those elders were descendants of and held up as paragons of the clan. It had happened twice. The elders attempted to play off the frustrations of those who would listen. The next time it happened, there would be hell to pay. Fugaku could almost see the horrified looks of indignation that would be on their faces when he had them taken away next time. A smile crept onto his face, hoping that they would do something stupid and give him a bit of satisfaction that he longed for at the moment. That small bit of joy from imagining what would likely be happening soon caused him to remember his last conversation with Hiashi. Sometimes it paid to have a fellow clan leader of a highly respected clan within the village. Because when the two or however many got together for a drink, usually one just had to start complaining about the pompous arrogance of their clan's members, traditions, or elders, and the other knew that pain from experience and sympathized without question. Apparently Hiashi was having his own headache with his clan's elders, especially with the upcoming birth of his daughter. That was a subject that had become a headache with Fugaku in a way due to one elder in particular, and the next time that damned Izayoi tried to order him to marry off Sasuke or Itachi one to the girl, Fugaku was going to burn the man to ashes and send the individual bags of his ashes to the rest of the elders with a note saying, "This is all that remains of Izayoi, who tried to order me on how to lead the clan. I lead this clan, you are to advise me. Remember that or share the fool's fate." Makoto hadn't returned from checking on Minato and Kushina's son and their students. He was never told that Naruto was Minato's son, but common knowledge said that most Uzumakis would always have some shade of red for a hair color. Adding things together through investigation and finding known and adding them with previously unknown facts to find the truth that was hidden in a pile of lies and half-truths had always been a favored pastime. Though he had the suspicion that Makoto knew something about both Kushina and Naruto that she wasn't telling him. But considering how much effort was put into trying to keep what was left of the Uzumaki clan safe, perhaps this was simply one of those things that should left alone. Fugaku understood that, after all, how many would come after his clan if the full information on the Mangekyo Sharingan came out? Refocusing his thoughts on Makoto, he looked at the time and realized she had been gone for an hour after she rushed in, grabbed a parcel of some sorts, and rushed out saying she was going to check on those kids. He thought about going after Makoto to settle some nagging feeling in the back of his mind when the door opening caught his attention. He looked over to see the bloody and bruised bodies of Obito, Rin, and Kakashi enter carrying Naruto and the bodies of two ninja who appeared to be from Kumo and an Anbu wearing a uniform that the Uchiha was becoming too familiar with, Root, before Makoto herself entered, wearing her mission uniform. What happened? He asked. Kakashi answered, a Black Ops team from Kumo was sent to kidnap Naruto for them. The team had Nii Yugito as a part of it, but we managed to pull through. Makoto-sama saved us from an Anbu who was attacked us afterwards. She said she would give us an explanation here. An explanation on what? Fugaku asked, a voice in his ear telling him that he already knew what. On why she has a Mangekyo. Said Obito, whom the Uchiha clan leader now noticed the hollow look in his eyes and the effort he was putting into his sight, probably due to some form of recently acquired injury. Obito, what happened to your eyes? Asked Fugaku. Obito's response shocked him. I have a Mangekyo, have had it for 2 years, and had to really put it to work to take down Yugito. That made sense, considering what he knew about the special Jonin. He then looked at Rin and noticed that her skin appeared to be highly irritated, as though she was suffering a mild burn on her entire body. Makoto nodded in affirmation to what her nephew said and quickly went to grab a first aid kit to begin treating the teenagers. Here, take this and put it onto your skin. My sensei made it for Kushina, who had a similar issue with her power going out of control and resulting in extreme irritation to her skin. Makoto said, handing a bottle of something to Rin, who did as she was told. Once the kids had been patched up, she began her story. I gained my Mangekyo on my final mission for Konoha, 3 years ago. The mission involved tracking down a criminal who had infiltrated the village and began carrying out assassinations of Uchiha authorities primarily and other targets. He had escaped and made a run for it when he was figured out when a sensor placed at a projected possible target detected his strange chakra moldings and alerted the security. He was a genjutsu expert with high affinity and expertise in the art who possessed a unique jutsu to carry out his assassinations that was puzzling everyone. Most perplexingly, some of the bodies he left had wounds that were self-inflicted. My little sister, Obito's mother now, and I were sent after the man, along with an Inuzuka tracker. We had caught up to him at the Land of Fire border, heading towards Kiri, or at least in the direction of the Land of Water. He engaged us in a surprisingly polite yet clearly malicious conversation. If it was in any other setting I would have thought him to be a casual acquaintance. He introduced himself as Moyo and explained that he was carrying out a mission for his master by testing out a special jutsu that the had developed before he revealed exactly how he carried out his assassinations, a mental brainwashing genjutsu that overrides and hijacks control of the part of the brain that controls muscle movements. He even offered to demonstrate it. Before we could order him to stop or restrain him, he had used it. Apparently the man possessed some sort of dojutsu, which one or what it looked like, I couldn't tell due to a spiral mask he was wearing, but he demonstrated the genjutsu by using it and it was aimed at Nao and she attempted to fight it, but her Sharingan was unable to counter the genjutsu for some reason. I was able to recognize it as a dojutsu-based jutsu due to the strange glow that was emitted from his mask's eyeholes, a clear sign of the activation of a jutsu attached to a dojutsu. The tracker and I were forced to fight her as Moyo got away. Nao had managed to get in and kill the tracker that we had been teamed up with for the mission. Her movements were strange, as if she was being outright possessed and was being worn like clothes, but they were ill-fitting to the point of interfering with movement. But as her successful kill of our tracker proved, it still made her a strong ninja, even if she lacked the grace that she usually had. In the end I couldn't figure out how to break her out. She was able to speak through the control with some effort and assured me she was at peace with what had to be done to stop her, so I was forced to mortally wound my sister. Her last words begged me to help take care of Obito after she was gone. I promised I would before she finally succumbed to her injuries and passed away. As the adrenaline wore off, I began to feel the pain, from injuries both physical and emotional. The only thought in my mind was that could think about was that I had just killed my baby sister. The pain in my heart felt terrible and the burning inside of my eyes felt just as bad. The Mangekyo Sharingan, the kaleidoscope copy wheel eye, had been awakened in my eyes, awakened by my loss. When I got back I decided that I was done being an active ninja. I decided that my remaining family, Obito included, needed me far more than the village needed me. I still kept up with my conditioning and training, I never stopped improving, even using my Mangekyo in certain circumstances to see what it was capable of. I noticed after the first actual test I did on its capabilities that the usage had damaged my eyesight slightly. Most would have overlooked it till their sight had been damaged beyond saving, but I always prided myself for noticing small details. Thanks to my sensei passing on some of her knowledge of how the body works and recovers from injuries, I made sure to try and space out my usages of the Mangekyo as much as possible to allow time for my eyes to recover from the strain. Because if we were ever faced with a threat or problem that my power could help solve, I would do it without hesitation. I started out with access to Amaterasu, the Black Flames, which was easy enough to test. Over time I gained Tsukuyomi, the torturing hellscape illusion, that was harder to test due to its genjutsu nature, but I managed with help from some, shall we say eager volunteers, who had tried to kill my family. My Susanoo awoke after Obito left the clan 2 years ago, because I felt as though I had betrayed Nao's final request of me. I know that I shouldn't have felt that way about it, but one thing I have learned in my life is that you could understand something perfectly in your mind, but your heart has a will of its own and rarely understands things the same way. But my despair after losing Kushina in the Kyuubi attack had given me the push my Susanoo to its current highest form, which was what you saw earlier. The three kids thought about what had been said by the Uchiha matriarch. However, Obito spoke up about something else. I know this may be off topic, but you hardly reacted to my eyes being nearly blinded by Mangekyo usage. I know my eyesight is just about gone, but I don't think that is the problem. How long have you known about my Mangekyo? Makoto smiled softly. Obito, you don't realize just how much you act like Nao and me. I've known since you returned from that mission into the Land of Water 2 years ago. You did exactly what I did after getting my Mangekyo. Cut out anything you believed to be less important in favor of where you believed you were needed most, which in your case was your team. Rin spoke this time. Makoto-sama, is there any way to heal the damage to Obito's eyesight? Makoto's expression went slightly grim. I'm afraid not through medicine. The damage inflicted on the eyes can be mitigated somewhat by newer treatments, as Obito has proved. Yes, I am aware of that. But there is another way. After I received my Mangekyo, I began to dig through old texts in the clan's records and found an interesting bit of history. The first Uchiha in known history to awaken the Mangekyo was Izuna, followed by his elder brother Madara. One of the texts left by Madara reveals that there is a power beyond the Mangekyo called the Eternal Mangekyo. It is activated by swapping the activated Mangekyo Sharingan between two Uchihas of close blood relation. The only known manifestation in known history was Madara himself, who took the eyes of his little brother Izuna after Senju Tobirama killed him in anger and vengeance for the death of his last younger brother at the hands of a gang of much older Uchihas. The Eternal Mangekyo completely reverses the damage done by the Mangekyo upon awakening, and eliminates the possibility of going blind and cuts the chakra requirements for usage of Mangekyo, as well as significantly reduces the strain caused by Mangekyo Jutsu. I believe my eyes and Obito's are compatible. His mother was my twin sister, so our genetics should be similar enough to trigger the change. We need to have it done if we hope to prevent Obito from going completely blind. Obito, we don't know if my eyes and your eyes are compatible, but if you wish to save your eyesight, are you willing to take the risk and see if it works? Obito took a long breath before he responded. Yeah, let's do this as soon as we can. Makoto looked at Rin before continuing. Rin-chan, are you capable of performing transplants between live subjects? Rin nodded. Yes, I am. How do you think that Kakashi got his Sharingan in the middle of a mission from a rogue Uchiha? Makoto continued. Good. Fugaku, I need you to call an emergency council meeting once we're done and get Rin and Kakashi there along with the bodies. And do not mention Yugito in the slightest. Her husband nodded in approval, before his expression turned gleeful. Based on the presence of a root agent, Danzo is involved in this mess. He defied a direct order of the Hokage, which means punishment will follow. To be part of the effort that brings that one-eyed bastard down is an honor and privilege I will gladly accept. We have a clean, sterile room in the compound for complex procedure if needed to be done to unstable victims, officers of the military police, and arrested individuals awaiting transfer to the prison. We'll do the transplant there. Makoto said as she led the two kids to the room in question. Finally finished. Rin thought to herself after finishing a last check to ensure the chakra coils had been properly connected between her two patients' transplanted eyes. The strange chakra molding occurring within the eyes must mean that Makoto's theory was right, the two Uchiha's eyes were compatible. Rin estimated it would take 2 weeks for the connections to stabilize enough for usage without complications. Rin turned towards her next two patients, Nii Yugito and the storm release user identified as Marui. Obito had pulled them out of the Kamui world before he was sedated to begin operating. Rin had to make sure Yugito could survive until her fate was decided. The injuries that had been inflicted on the Kumo Jinchuriki had already begun healing due to her Biju. Rin merely treated her skin, healed the open wounds on the girl, and finally went over both Kakashi's 5-point seal and Obito's chakra binding seal to ensure effectiveness. Then she moved on to Marui and dealt with anything he had that might be life-threatening. Rin panted in exhaustion after finishing, getting some rest before she had to go before the Konoha Council. Her thoughts wandered back to some of her precious memories. Her and her teammates passing Minato-sensei's genin test was the first. The second was Kakashi finally opening up to her and Obito. The third was the training that had taken more than half a year to complete, when Minato-sensei passed his Rasengan technique down to his students. However, her mind wandered towards the middle of the second phase. Obito had been lagging behind both herself and Kakashi, his progress for the day was steadily decline, and he seemed to be regressing. Then he made a comment that set off her mental flags, "Why can't I do this like I was earlier? And why do my hands like I burned them on a fire?" Rin quickly stopped her attempt and grabbed his hands and removed a set of gloves he had started wearing. What she found confirmed what she thought it was. "You're done training for today, Obito, these are chakra burns from overexerting Tenketsu. I can put something on them to help them heal, but you have to give those Tenketsu a rest." Obito had been known to stubbornly put off the advice of people if he thought it to be getting his way, but he just nodded and allowed her to get to work. Once she was done, she turned to him and said, "You need to be more careful. If you want to be Hokage, you need to know when you're at your limit and back off." Obito just grinned before responding, "All right, Rin. I will. Sorry about worrying you." He wandered off while Rin went back to attempting to complete the phase. Kakashi was giving her a look that she couldn't quite read. When she asked him about it, he merely shrugged and told her don't worry about it. Obito's confession a few weeks ago made a few things slide into place in both that memory and others as well. Then a voice chimed in. "I was wondering when you would pick up on his behavior. I thought human romance confused you. I said the worry you humans attached to it confused me. I have been around humans long enough to read their behavior. Was Obito really that obvious about his feeling towards me? Based on the 2 years I have been in you, I would say yes. Do you know what you're going to do about it? I'm going to give him a chance. He's a really nice guy who put a lot of other things before himself. He has earned it." Obito and Makoto both began to rouse from their anesthesia-induced slumber to aid in the procedure to notice the darkness that was their vision before feeling around their eyes to find bandages. "We need to leave those on there for 2 weeks as your eyes adjust to your bodies." The Uchihas responded in affirmation before a question was asked by Rin. "Makoto-sama, why do you want the power found in those eyes even if you have given up being a ninja?" Makoto smiled softly before responding, "Rin-chan, there's no need to be so formal, Makoto will do. I don't want the power, I want the guarantee that is attached to it, that I won't go blind and miss my boys' lives because I cannot see from using this power to protect them." Obito cut in, "Hey guys, how are we going to remove Yugito and that other guy from the Kamui world?" Rin shook her head at how air-headed Obito could be sometimes. "Obito-kun, you should remember that you pulled them out before I operated." Obito scratched his head in embarrassment. "Yeah, I kind of forgot about that and just had a moment of panic," before he paused, his brain having finally caught up to what Rin called him, giving her massive amused smile. "Wait, why you CC called me Obito-kun? Does this mean?" Rin cut him off before he decided to start rambling and say something that would ruin the moment. "Yes and no. I don't know if what I feel for you is or will be the same as what you obviously feel for me, but I'm more than willing to give you chance." Obito smiled and softly said, "Thanks Rin-chan, I won't make you question your choice." Makoto merely smiled and thought to herself, "Ought to be young and in love." Fugaku and Kakashi both walked in with the Uchiha head speaking, "It's time." Rin nodded. It was time for Danzo's swan song. The council was silent as crypt after the revelation of the attempted kidnapping and its thwarting. No one said a word as they wondered how a four-man Black Ops team managed to get into Konoha without Anbu finding out and alerting others. Danzo had demanded where the other two members of the team were, but Kakashi countered claiming there wasn't enough of a body left for one member and the other that was still alive was in the military police's custody. Hiruzen attempted to wrap things up before Rin revealed one last piece of evidence. Hokage-sama, there was another ninja there. An Anbu wearing a uniform I had never seen before killed the last member of the Black Ops team and moved to kidnap all four us plus the one we apprehended alive. It was only thanks to Obito pushing past his limits and reacting as fast as he could that saved us. Danzo's heart sank at that mentioning and only his self-control stopped him from going pale. Then Rin pulled out another storage scroll and unsealed the body of the root Anbu. The council went pale at the leaf symbol engraved on the ivory mask. One of their own had attempted to kidnap the son of one of its heroes. But everyone knew who sent the Anbu. Upon noticing the killing intent from Hiruzen suddenly appeared despite the man appearing calm. He slowly turned to Danzo and said, "Anbu, arrest Shimura Danzo for defying the order to disband Root and ignoring my order to leave Naruto alone. Have his ability to mold chakra permanently stripped from him and put him in a cell to await punishment." Anbu quickly complied. Danzo quickly shouted, "You shall not. I have devoted my entire life to Konoha and its advancement." Hiruzen stared for a second before responding, "I'm sure you're right about that, Danzo, but you have lost sight of the difference between the good of Konoha and the good of Danzo. Obito was proven right about his accusation towards you. You may share Tobirama-sensei's fears of the Uchiha and other villages, but it is clear to me that part of his decision to choose me as his successor was based on that he saw that an extremer version of his views could not be allowed to take root in Konoha chain of command, if the village was to become truly great." Danzo looked at Kaharu and Homura, hoping that two who shared his view would defend him, but he saw the look that had set into them with Hiruzen's response. The Anbu grabbed Danzo and the crippled War Hawk went with them, knowing he was beaten and there was nothing he could do. Hiruzen spoke up, "If there is nothing else, we will reconvene tomorrow. Kakashi, Rin, meet me in my office." The two complied and followed the old Hokage there. "I know there was more to the story than what you told in the council room, so tell it now." Hiruzen commanded the teenagers. Rin spoke. "One of the members of the Black Ops team was Nii Yugito, the current Nibi Jinchuriki. She was the one we claimed there wasn't a body left of." Kakashi took out a kunai and used it to draw blood before running through hand seals and summoning the restrained Jinchuriki using the seal that was applied to her as part of her restraints. Hiruzen immediately answered, "We should return her to Kumo and hope this was an isolated incident." Kakashi spoke now. "Apologies Hokage-sama, but we cannot allow it. She knows too much, and if she is returned even with her mind wiped of any useful information, her Biju still has it. We need a response that will get the point across. We will not tolerate this kind of action." Hiruzen sighed knowing that the copy nin was right and knew where it was headed. "What do you suggest?" "Summon Jiraiya-sama to have her Biju transferred to a new host." The two youths answered as one. Hiruzen nodded sadly, knowing that this would most likely mean the end of any hope of peace with Kumo, while also understanding that this message had to be sent. "I'll send him a letter." Mount Myoboku, the home of the Toad summoning clan. Jiraiya sat among the statues of the failed sages as he pondered. He had begun reflecting on the events of the past 2 weeks. News of Minato's death had reached him when Garotora arrived. Jiraiya decided that for now it would be best to let the pain settle and the wound of the loss of the man he loved like a son heal. Jiraiya had sent a message to Hiruzen-sensei, who had retaken the Hokage hat, soon after. His message stated that anonymous funds would be given to the Hokage's office starting 2 weeks after the death of Minato, and it would come in bi-weekly consistently afterwards and was to be silently shuffled into the mission payment of the brats taking care of Naruto and helping to pay for genin teams to assist in his care for when they needed it. He had visited Konoha to attend the private funeral for both Minato and Kushina, which was a few days after the attack. He paid for any expense that would be incurred. He came back to Myoboku to find some quiet to write in now that he had all of his research compiled for his next Ika book, and to train to better master sage mode in his off hours. He was soon distracted by Fukusaku coming rather hurriedly. "Jiraiya-chan, the seer toad has summoned you. He had a vision in the night that you need to hear." Jiraiya gathered up his material and began heading to the pool that the seer toad, Gamamaru, made his home in. Jiraiya knew that it was big, if Fukusaku was this excited about it. Upon arriving they were met with the sight of Gamamaru more awake and alert than Jiraiya had ever seen him. The ancient toad sage spoke, "Jiraiya-chan, so good you came as fast as you could. The boy who was born not so long ago, the boy of your student Minato, I had a vision more clearly than my usual premonitions, far more detailed, and I know that it involved him last night. He alongside 2 others had become the successors to my original disciples, before there were toad summoners. The boy is one of the last heirs of the clan of the Whirlpool, within him lies the Kyubi no Kitsune, a fallen protector of this world. The boy has been deemed the successor to Ashura. The desire to protect and one day lead shall burn within him, a wild orange flame that is brighter than many infernos. While one born before him from the clan of the Crimson Eyes that read those they see, was deemed the successor to Indra. A raging and vengeful hatred shall burn a dark blaze within him, and shall bring him to target those who have committed many evils, and they shall be struck down by the glowing purple haze cast by his flame. These 2 names that I have mentioned, are the sons of one of my first disciples, Otsutsuki Hagoromo, who you know as the Sage of 6 Paths. One who is yet to be born, yet you will know more about her than she will know about herself for a long time, was born to the clan of the pale eyes that see all around them. She is deemed the successor to my disciple, Otsutsuki Hamura, known as the Moon Sage. A gentle blue flame fueled by the desire to protect her own, like a mother cat and her kittens, shall burn within her. They will inherit the powers of their predecessors and challenge a great evil that will be appearing before 2 decades have passed, and through their victory shall Hagoromo's dream of peace be made fulfilled. But if they fail and are defeated, then this world shall disappear. And you shall be one of many who helped shape their path. For young Naruto and this girl yet to be born, you will be the one of 2 guiding stars down their path." Jiraiya looked up almost awestruck as he realized just what had been told to him. The sage was real, among many other revelations. However, a small monkey summon appeared before them with a message intended for Jiraiya. The seer toad commanded, "Read it, then make a choice. Your new path starts now. We will be resuming this conversation at a later date." Before closing his eyes and slipping back into the disposition that Jiraiya had always seen of the seer toad. Which brought Jiraiya back to the present. The letter the monkey had carried contained news that the Nibi Jinchuriki had led a Black Ops mission into Konoha, but she was captured and her Biju was to be transferred to a new host. The letter requested instructions for finding a viable host for the Biju and his assistance with the transfer. Jiraiya had just finished his response that yes, he would be there within a week, and the message included a method to extract a tiny bit of the Nibi's chakra and use it to test for host viability in a hot-cold style manner that could be measured to find a viable candidate. However, the Toad Sage had a nagging feeling that the prophecy was tied directly to what was now happening. A week later, Jiraiya had arrived at Konoha early that evening, taking his time after leaving Myoboku to reflect and make a few decisions. He had arrived and found the house the 3 teens were staying in easily, mostly because it was Minato's house. He had been welcomed in by Kakashi, who directed him to a living room where Obito sat with bandages blindfolding him, and with Naruto's crib nearby, probably due to paranoia after the Kumo attempted kidnapping. They said that the bandages were due to come off in a week. He decided to get the conversation about why he was asked to come going. "So have you found anyone who's compatible with Nibi yet?" Kakashi answered as Rin was preparing the food. "Yeah, we have. But it's a tad bit complicated." Jiraiya responded, "Well, we have time." The teen had explained that they tested many children trying to find a viable host, but due to unsatisfactory results were forced to begin testing on the members of minor clans to find a compatible host. Those tests yielded slightly better results, but still not good enough to be used for the Jinchuriki. They moved up to major clans, and the few tests they did went much better. Out of the ones tested from the major clans, those from the Hyuga clan did far better than the rest. So we decided to narrow the tests down to members of the Hyuga, and the result of the last one tested is the most promising, but we did a second test on that candidate to be extra certain, and it was still the best we had seen. Kakashi finished. "Well, who is it?" Jiraiya asked. "Are you aware of Hyuga Hitomi, Hiyashi's wife?" The silver-haired teen asked. Jiraiya wondered where this might be heading. "Yeah, she was Tsunade's student, wasn't she?" With Kushina and Makoto, but she was the only one of her genin who took up medical ninjutsu beyond mere basics. Kakashi nodded. Yeah, that's her, she's pregnant with her first child, a girl, and we ran both of the tests with her permission. The child is a match, she can properly contain the Nibi, but Hitomi isn't due until late December. Furthermore, Hitomi is the best scenario we could have hoped for because of her loyalty to the village before her clan. Jiraiya responded, the due date is not too much of a problem, we just need to keep Yugito alive until then, and that would give us plenty of time to figure out how to pick the lock on her seal in preparation for the transfer. At that moment Rin brought the food to the table before guiding Obito to the table and taking a seat next to Obito. Alright boys, the food is done, save business for later after we're done eating. Everyone agreed unanimously. 20 ANBUs were at work dismantling the root division. Thankfully they had help from a 12-year-old member who was the highest-ranking member of the division following the mass detaining of the captains of the unit. Unfortunately he had been part of the unit for so much of his life that documentation for his original identity no longer existed. The only name he had was the name he had been given by the captains of the unit, Shin. The Anbu leading the dismantling, Tenzo, was a former member of the Rogue Black Ops unit and understood too well what happened to the exceptionally young recruits. The other ANBUs were horrified at the extremely young age that Danzo had begun scouting for recruits at. The most recent one was just a year old, and his identity had already been destroyed, though the documents had indicated that his parents died in the QB attack just a few weeks ago. The only name he had now was Sai. Though Shin had volunteered to take care of the boy. Documents indicated that Danzo had plans for forced recruitment of multiple children, even children from clans. The eldest of which were being targeted before Danzo was taken down were Yamanaka Fu, a noted to be exceptionally gifted Yamanaka. And Aburame Torun, who possessed a genetic mutation that rendered him unable to host the standard Aburame Kikaichu parasites but gave him an astoundingly high affinity for the clan's least known and most deadly insect type. The Rinkaichu, the phosphorus nano-insects, a species that function more like a potent disease that tore apart the bonds between cells with their venom. Research on the bug done out of curiosity after discovering the information on them would be haunting Tenzo's nightmares for a month and made him wish he hadn't. The fact that any Aburame could theoretically host them with the right conditions present made him shudder. The sole comfort was that only a few Aburames had the conditions present to host Rinkaichu, and Torun was the only one to be able to host the deadly insect species for some time. However, the most damning thing he would be hearing today would be now. Sir, I found a mission document, said one of the operatives who was assisting Tenzo in going through the document office. And, asked Tenzo. It's incomplete, replied the Anbu. Tenzo's eyes went wide. If it was incomplete, it meant that it was ongoing and that the operative carrying it out hadn't returned yet. Does it list who was sent and what the mission was? Tenzo asked. It does both, sir. It lists their name as Chameleon and their mission was to retrieve Uzumaki Naruto should the initial operation fail. The order that the operative was initially given was to infiltrate Kumo and wait for further orders. The Anbu replied. Which means he is still there. Do we have his personnel file? Tenzo asked. Yes, I found it earlier. And his is much longer than most operatives his age. The subordinate replied. Why? Tenzo asked precariously. Because it listed the amount of experimentation he was subjected to and what each entailed. The experimentation afforded him accelerated growth both physically and mentally, cut the rate of decay due to age, and gave the young boy an accelerated rate of healing comparable to that of a Jinchuriki. Unlike the others, there was an actual name attached to his file rather than just a call sign, due to the unique circumstances of his recruitment. He only had a given name but no clan or family name. His name was Kabuto. 2 months later, December 27th, screams had already rang through the halls of the delivery ward as Hyuga Hitomi fought to give birth to her daughter. Labored breathing from the new mother and soft crying from the newborn girl were all that remained of the pained screaming and hormone-addled rage that previously plagued the room. Hitomi finally had enough of her clarity returned to her that she gave her daughter a name. Welcome to the world, little Hinata-chan. Rin moved to speak. Hitomi, we need to get on with the sealing, we need to get it done before Yugito figures out a way to break free. Hitomi nodded but asked one thing. I want to be there. I figure you would say that. Obito-kun helped me get her into a wheelchair. Rin said somewhat somberly. The Uchiha affirmed. Right. After making sure Hitomi was secure, and after looking her in the eye with his Sharingan active, Obito softly said, Kamui. Dragging the adult in the wheelchair, himself and his girlfriend, and the infant into the Kamui world before exiting in the ritual place where most of the seals had been set up and were awaiting Hinata. Jiraiya turned to them and spoke, about time you got here. Why is Hitomi asleep? Did she want to come and be here but fainted due to exhaustion, or what? Rin then looked at Hitomi's face to see that, yes, she was asleep. Obito responded, I put her in a time-delayed forced sleep genjutsu. I have a feeling that what we're about to do, she doesn't need to see. Jiraiya nodded before going to do a final check on the array he had set up. Rin gently picked up the infant out of her mother's arms and placed her in the intended spot, while Jiraiya went to work placing the needed formulas onto her for the ritual to work and hide all trace of her soon-to-be-held Jinchuriki status, except for her unnaturally powerful as well as fast-growing chakra reserves, fast healing, and her ability to tap into her Biju's chakra. The seal would only be visible to standard sight when chakra was molded a certain way. What he was building he was borrowing from the design of the seal placed on Naruto, including the part of the seal that hid it from the Byakugan. Hiruzen had told him that Minato had gotten paranoid about some things and Jiraiya couldn't believe that something would spook Minato this bad, but the anti-Byakugan measure built into the seal on Naruto proved it. Jiraiya made sure that Obito integrated his Kamui marker into this seal as well. One final check with the newly added half of the overall array, because you can never be too careful with something like this. Once he was done he walked over to Yugito and removed her gag momentarily and positioned himself to quickly replace it should she attempt suicide by biting off her own tongue. Got any last words, kitten? Yugito shot him a venomous glance and said, go to hell, Kuma will avenge me and take back the Nibi. As well as claim the Kyubi and Sanbi. Jiraiya shrugged before responding, that's pretty much what I expected to hear from you. Following up by replacing the gag to stop any attempts at suicide during the process. Fuinjutsu, Biju Containment Transfer Seal, activate. Muffled screaming from Yugito began as the Nibi was pulled from her, tearing apart her chakra system and depositing the flaming monster cat into the seal array placed on Hinata's stomach. Rin and Obito both could tell that the child was in discomfort but held off on helping to ease it until the sealing was complete. Rin was starting to understand why Obito placed the genjutsu on the woman. No mother should have to watch their child like this with nothing they can do that wouldn't end up hurting the child. Hinata's soft crying had begun again and Rin could imagine the cries tearing her mother apart to have to watch her precious daughter go through such an ordeal if she hadn't been sedated. After 2 more minutes the sealing ended, the dried up husk of Yugito collapsed through her bonds and fell to the floor with an almost sickening sound. The kanji that was drawn onto Hinata's body began pulling together to form the seal on her stomach. Obito placed his hand to Hitomi's head and released his genjutsu on her, waking her up. What happened? The slightly disoriented woman asked. I placed you in a genjutsu, I figured it would have been for the best. Obito responded. Hitomi nodded before turning to her child and whispering, you may hate me and be angry with me for what I had allowed to be done when we tell you one day, but one day you will understand, Hinata-chan. Rin could feel Isobu's thoughts. Hopeful that the Nibi would be able to get along with her new host and be able to regain some of her faith in humanity. But guilt, for by his allowing, she had been caged up like an animal once again. To sum it up nicely, the Nibi had a new Jinchuriki and a new prison. But Rin held out hope that Hinata would be the last Jinchuriki of the Nibi. Chapter 4, Coming of the Rising Dawn. 5 days after the Nibi sealing. Unknown location. Within a cave hidden within one of the elemental nations stood of 4 people, all of whom were shrouded in black cloaks, but only 3 were decorated with a red cloud pattern. The odd one amongst the group wore a white mask with a black and red flame pattern adorning it. From the eyeholes of his mask, a faint glow could be seen. The one next to him was a strange fusion of plant and man. Half of its body was white with a green cat-like eye, while the other half was black with a yellow eye. Around its neck and head was a Venus flytrap-like protrusion. The next one in the meeting was the sole female of the group. She possessed orange eyes and blue hair, decorated with an origami construct stylized into a rose. The final one possessed orange hair and rippled purple eyes, with piercings made of an unknown metal visible on the entirety of his head and presumably more hidden by his clothes. Zetsu, what news do you bring? Asked the young woman in an almost eerie monotone. Well Conan, since you asked, Madara-sama has recovered almost enough from his attack on Konoha to begin attending meetings again. He severely underestimated just how bad his condition was after his fight against Hashirama over half a century ago due to him having been in little combat during that time, resulting in the Hokage inflicting such damage requiring a long recovery time. The strange creature identified as Zetsu responded, in two separate voices for each half of his body which seemed to be separate entities, replied to the woman identified as Conan. And what of the rumor concerning Danzo? Asked the purple-eyed man. It would seem that rumor is correct, Danzo has been removed from power. But that is just the surface to the story, Pain-sama. Oh yes, he was put down by one of his own machinations backfiring on him. He allowed a Kumo Black Ops team with their Nibi Jinchuriki in to kidnap the boy who we identified as the Kyubi Jinchuriki so he could take the boy from them. We don't know if either party knew this fact going in, but they were stopped before they could escape the Land of Fire. Danzo was exposed thanks to his root Anbu deciding to try and kidnap the rescuers and the boy and the captured Nibi Jinchuriki and failing. The third Hokage removed him from any position he held, ordered him imprisoned with his chakra molding capabilities sealed during the following council meeting that night after his interference was made known, and that his root division is being dismantled and from what we could tell that process is almost finished. But they haven't executed him, only by the insistence of the village elders in recognition for what he has done that has been good for the village. He has a life sentence and all of his captains from root have been imprisoned as well for their part in his crimes. The strange creature explained to the man now identified as Pain. Anything else? Conan asked. We found Yugito's body in storage to be sent back to Kumo as a warning. Her cause of death was extraction of her biju, but we don't know who it was transferred to nor when it occurred. The best guess we have is that it probably occurred within the last week. Thanks to her fight with the rescuers, we now have identified Konoha's Nohara Rin as the Sanbi Jinchuriki. The strange creature responded. Good. But I see that your master sent you with a question of his own for us, so what is it? Pain responded. Madara-sama does inquire when you plan to take Amy and kill Hanzo and so we ask for him. Zetsu's white half said. We plan to move within the next few months, preferably the week that spring is due to begin. That way a symbolic changing of season for Ami's leadership will occur with our takeover. Along with the parting of the perpetual rain clouds that cover the land of rain for the first time in living memory, allowing a brief respite from the constant downpour to the people of rain, many of whom have never seen sunlight in their lives. Pain responded. The perfect way to bring Ami's people to your side with what we already planned out and convince them of your godhood. Black Zetsu responded. That is the plan. Now we have tasks to attend to in preparation. And the part that you, your master, and this Moyo have to play are pivotal to our success. Pain said. Zetsu nodded before both the creature and the voiceless member, identified as Moyo, merely walked away. Time was ticking away until the day of reckoning. Konoha. 1 month following the Nibi sealing. Alright, today marks 1 full month with the Nibi in her and there are no signs of damage on the seal. The seal placed on Hinata is effective, we don't have anything to worry about. Jiraiya said to the assembled group consisting of Team Minato, Hitomi, and the third Hokage. There was a collective sigh of relief from everyone present, Jiraiya included, each for their own personal reasons. For starter it meant no additional work was required, which carried the distinct possibility of the entire seal being compromised with the slightest mistake in the right spot, resulting in Hinata's death and the release of the Nibi, resulting in even more death. For Team Minato and Jiraiya both it meant they were no longer confined to Konoha. Jiraiya was free to resume his duties outside as the primary information gather for Konoha as well as his research. Rin, Kakashi, and Obito could freely take missions to help ease their finances while leaving at least one of them in the leaf to take care of Naruto. The group had unanimously agreed to keep Hiashi in dark about this for the time being. They were all nervous about telling him everything and risk the information somehow reaching the Hyuga elders that one of their own was the new Nibi Jinchuriki. Thank the kami that last-minute matters came up that demanded Hiyashi's attention and got him away from the delivery room. Though they were a little perplexed about the convenience of the situation, it was almost as if someone had manufactured it. Who the hell had helped them was the question. But back to the matter at hand, Rin had volunteered to take care of Naruto for the first few months before going out on missions again and leaving Kakashi or Obito on care duty. The thought of either one sitting around taking care of Naruto without whether herself or Makoto or any other person she trusted who knew how to take care of a child. Damn it. Is this what it feels like to be a parent worrying over their child? Because honestly I'm terrified. On the more positive note, you're getting valuable experience for later on if you decide to have kids of your own, specifically the worry. That thought terrifies me even more ironically enough, but I definitely see your point. I think my fearful thoughts about being a parent are based on my own misgivings about myself at my current point in my life. Oh, thank goodness I was on the right subject. I figured that I was, but I wanted to be sure that it was. I'll be honest, I spaced out a little bit and I thought you may have been suffering worries in your shinobi career or love life. Wow, that is mild compared to your usual sarcasm. What is the problem? Because you're only quiet and not taking passive-aggressive jabs occasionally when something has you distracted, so what is it this time? I feel something putting life at great unease, like the world itself knows something horrible is about to be unleashed. Part of your current worries might be due to our link sharing the unease I can feel in the world attaching itself to and enhancing your woes. Though considering what you are worried about, at least half of it is your own legitimate concerns. That statement has me worried, Isobu, because anytime you voice your concern about something it usually ends up exploding into a nightmare. Damn it. Great. So thanks for putting me on edge, for Kami only knows how long till things finally explode. You're welcome, Rin. I could probably give you more if you would like. Was the giant turtle's remark. Nope, no thank you. Not until things finally blow over with what you just jinxed us with, and even then not for a few months after whatever is going to happen finally settles. Rin concluded her conversation with her mental roommate, for some reason getting the distinct impression that if she was looking at his face when Isobu made that last remark there would be a smug look on his face. Rin-chan, are you alright? A familiar voice said, bringing her back to reality completely. Rin jolted and looked around before her eyes settled on Obito, who asked the question that startled her. Yes, Obito-kun, I'm fine. I got distracted by my thoughts and Turtle started talking. SNCE the fight with the Kumo shinobi. Rin had told both Kakashi and Obito about her freeing Isobu in gratitude for his cooperation in helping take down Yugito and him deciding that she was the first person in a long time that he believed to be deserving of his power. She told them the same story he had told her about the origin of the Biju and their purpose, as well as their fall from grace due to human being unable to view them as anything but monster. Kakashi was slightly wary that the Sanbi could theoretically break out at any time, probably due to bad memories from the Kyuubi attack only a few months ago, which Isobu admitted was entirely reasonable considering the damage and carnage caused by the fox, even if the Biju had been set free from Kushina by a third party that possessed a Mangekyo Sharingan according to Minato sensei and sent on a rampage after being put under that person's power. Obito had made it clear that he trusted her decision no matter what it was. He only offered concerns that destroying the seal could make it easier for someone to extract Isobu from her. That had her concerned when she heard it, but Isobu assured her that she only destroyed the element that kept him prisoner, the elements that kept others from simply pulling them apart were kept intact. Rin relayed Isobu's assurances, which put his fears to rest. Since the resealing of the Nibi, Rin had come clean about to Jiraiya, Hiruzen, Hitomi, and Makoto about the means she resorted to in order to be able to defeat Yugito. The looks of surprise on their faces was honestly the most hilarious thing she had seen since Kushina's death. It took a while to convince Jiraiya and Hiruzen that Isobu wasn't a threat and was not the monster that countless had refused to believe that the Biju were anything but those monsters. Though when she got to telling everyone about what all Isobu told her about the Sage of Six Paths, Jiraiya looked as though he had heard some of it before, while some of it looked as though he was hearing it for the first time. When she asked about it, Jiraiya merely said he would talk later. Both Rin and Isobu were very interested in what Jiraiya had to say. Hopefully he would speak before he left Konoha. Concurrently in Konoha, Fugaku was feeling satisfied. Izuyoi had finally gone and tried to order Fugaku to marry Itachi or Sasuke to Hiyashi's daughter again. Though this time he had been given fair warning in advance to the consequences for doing it again. Fugaku had originally never intended to follow through on that idea he had a few months ago, but what had just happened made him follow through on his threat. It had pretty much been like almost every other time the old fool had ordered Fugaku to pressure Hiyashi into agreeing to marry either Itachi or Sasuke to the girl who was only a month old. Fugaku had told him no and furthermore reminded Izayoi of his threat being carried out unless the man changed his tone. However, this time the man's reaction to being told no was far more volatile. He had demanded it be done or he would organize a mutiny against Fugaku and remove him from power and then have it done. It took Fugaku a moment to register that the bastard had threatened violence and mutiny to see his demand accomplished. Then another to figure out why Izayoi wanted it done. He was in league with the other elders plotting the coup. He wanted to tie the Hyuga leadership to the Uchihas so they would hopefully support the revolt. Which brings him back to the now. So what will your answer be? Will you do it willingly or will I have to remove you from power? Izayoi questioned. Uchiha Izayoi, do you have any idea what you have just done? I had no desire to carry out my threat in letter rather than spirit, but you have just given me reason and cause to. Fugaku responded. What the hell are you talking about? The old Uchiha asked. You just threatened your clan head with mutiny and violence. Mutiny within a clan's leadership is allowed when there is the threat of the clan plotting against the village. However, your mutiny is plotted to rally both the Uchiha and Hyuga to rebellion against the village in hopes of achieving supremacy over it. You have just given me the authority to pass my own judgment. You shall be executed in front of the other elders to make an example out of you. Fugaku stated, killing intent radiating off of him slightly more with every few words. Izayoi quickly reached for something behind his back before Fugaku quickly grabbed a kunai and stabbed into the man's dominant arm, before breaking the man's other arm. Fugaku quickly pulled Izayoi's other arm to see what he was reaching for. What he found was no surprise, a dagger coated with snake venom which Fugaku recognized as being from the snakes that nested in the mushroom forests that surrounded Kusagaku. This was made to ensure death no matter how light the wound. Age and relying on surprise when the blade was not expected had dulled the once fierce ninja, and Fugaku had seen it coming the moment Izayoi threatened violence to depose Fugaku. Seto, get in here. Fugaku shouted to one of the guards. Yes, Fugaku-sama, what the hell? The man said. Izayoi was planning to incite mutiny for control of the clan and attempted to assassinate me. Have his chakra sealed and bring him to the clan's meeting hall, then have the other elders brought there alongside the rest of the clan. I'm ending this stupidity. Fugaku declared. As you wish, Fugaku-sama. The guard said before leaving with the battered old man to carry out his orders. The clan was assembled as asked within an hour. The only Uchiha who was missing was Obito for him having left the clan. Fugaku began to speak. I thank you all for coming on such short notice. Please leave questions till later to ensure this goes as quickly as possible. By now you probably have noticed Izayoi in his sorry state. He and half of our elders have been conspiring to rally our clan to rebellion against the village in hopes of establishing dominance over the entirety of Konoha. Izayoi had been ordering me to marry one of my sons to the daughter of Hyuga Hiyashi, in hopes of using her to drive the clan to assist them in this coup. I had been refusing to carry out his demand out of respect for Hiyashi and love for my sons, neither of whom deserve having to be forced into a marriage at this age to appease the demands of senile old men who are still haunted by ghosts that have long since passed on. However, earlier today he once again demanded me to arrange the marriage. When I refused him, Izayoi demanded that I do it or else he would have me removed, with or without violence, and have it done himself. When I explained the error of his statement, he reached for a poisoned dagger he held on his person to assassinate me. I stopped him and had his ability to mold chakra removed. The dagger was coated with the venom from Kusa's infamous mushroom shadow snake, the poison of which is lethal and highly damaging to the body. Izayoi has been interrogated while I awaited you all to arrive and he has confessed his intentions. This is not a trial, this is judgment. This is an example being made. Fugaku turned to Izayoi. You knew the consequences of ordering me on how to run this clan the last time you tried to command me. Do you have any last words? The man only shot a look of venom at Fugaku before going to say something that was most likely meant to incite rebellion. However, before the words even left his mouth, his throat was slashed by Fugaku, ending the elder's life. Fugaku turned to the elders who had attempted to incite rebellion before. Izayoi is an example of what happens when you overstep the authority your position allows. The purpose of the elders is to use their experience to advise the clan head on how to best lead the clan. You would do well to remember that unless you wish to share his fate. He then dismissed everyone before moving towards Makoto, who had Sasuke in her arms and Itachi at her side. 2 months later, The countryside within the land of tea. How the hell did I end up in this mess? Was the thought that circled in Obito's mind as he stared down a Kiri nin not much older than himself. What had happened was that Kakashi and Obito had been assigned to guard a noble who was visiting friends in the land of tea. No major trouble was expected, but they were assigned due to the noble himself being a relatively high-value target to bandits, and on the off-chance shinobi from other villages were sent after the man. The bandits were easy to deal with whenever they did attack, barely worth the effort. They welcomed the easy low-risk fights after Yugito's infiltration. They made it to the man's destination in relatively good time without too many distractions. However, the return trip was where everything went to hell. First off, he refused to get instantly brought back to Konoha, said he wanted a chance to enjoy this country's scenery. That proved to be a horrible mistake. It left them vulnerable to additional attacks and any attacks by enemy shinobi should they come. Well, they did indeed come. 2 Kiri nin had been sent after Obito and Kakashi's client, apparently hired by one or more of the noble's rivals to kill him, however not expecting that the man would have hired Jonins. The moment that their intent had become apparent, Obito grabbed the client and pulled him into the Kamui world. Kakashi recognized the elder of the pair from the bingo book apparently, and moved in a way to indicate he would take that one. That was just fine with Obito. He also just barely noticed Kakashi covering his Sharingan after having it uncovered to respond to the initial attack. However, Obito realized that there was more to the story when the opponent yelled out upon recognizing who Kakashi was. This was something personal for the Kiri nin, while for Kakashi it was just another opponent, but he had every intention of using that unbalanced anger to take his opponent down. Then Obito took a moment to look at his opponent for any obvious signs of anything he could use to formulate a general plan of how to take on his opponent. The boy was barely older than Kakashi and Obito, but he carried himself like war veterans who had seen multiple wars. However, Obito noticed the sword that the boy carried at his side and recognized it as one used by a 7th swordsman hopeful, usually designed after the sword they hopped to one-day use. But Obito was more interested in the jutsu he would most likely know. Ninja art, hidden mist jutsu, and he might have some unique water release jutsu. He obviously hadn't put together that Obito was an Uchiha, or else he would be more cautious in his stance. He also hadn't figured out that Kakashi had placed a small genjutsu on him that screwed with his ability to recognize certain things. Most usefully, this could be used to throw off an opponent's ability to identify the Sharingan. Kakashi had given Obito a bone while he had his Sharingan uncovered. Kakashi did know just how bad Obito wanted that particular jutsu and figured this would be the opponent who would most likely have it. This genjutsu made it a hell of a lot easier to copy jutsu off an opponent who did not believe there was a reason to be worried about their jutsu being copied. The fight began with attacker flying through hand signs. Obito's Sharingan finished predicting his movements before he began attacking. He's opening with water bullet, probably to distract from his real opening move. More than likely he's trying to distract me from his real move. Water release, water bullet. The attack came and Obito quickly avoided it, but then another barrage of water bullets came from the left and just about made contact with him. He made a clone to attack as well. The barrage from in front was more powerful than the one that tried to blindside me, so I'm guessing he used a water clone and the one I'm facing is the real one. Obito quickly flew through hand signs before screaming, "Fire release, great fireball jutsu." Spewing a fireball towards the one he assumed was the clone. The attack made contact and the clone splattered from the attack. Why don't I simply implant a suggestion to use the jutsu, copy it, grab Kakashi, and warp out of here? Okay, just make sure it is subtle enough for him to not question it. Obito thought as he placed the suggestion into his opponent's head with his Sharingan. Ninja art, hidden mist jutsu. It worked. Haha, I got it. Obito ran through hand signs to cover his escape. Ninja art, hidden mist jutsu. You copied me. His opponent screamed, not knowing that his opponent had already escaped. Kakashi was in the middle of hiding from his opponent when Obito appeared next to him. Kakashi, I got the jutsu, we're getting out of here. Alright, was the laconic response. They were back home in a moment. However, Rin looked like she was being seriously bothered by something. What's wrong, Rin-chan? Obito asked. Rin responded. Something is happening, Obito-kun, something that is spooking Isobu. He isn't making sense, occasionally he's muttering things that has me terrified. He's saying his father's power has returned. He's asking why that power is being used like this, and I have no idea why he is saying that. Land of Rain. 2 hours later. I must admit, I don't know how you managed to separate me from my men, but you must be skilled if you did so without me noticing. One figure said, wearing a poncho and the uniform of a Megakure with a breather mask. We had helped to set this event in place, but we have been planning this for a while. A woman wearing a black cloak with red clouds on it with a straw hat on her head covering her face in shadows. All right then, you seem to know who you're dealing with, seeing as you sent 7 of you. Who are you? The first man asked again. Do you recognize us? The one at front of the group asked before pulling his hat off but keeping his eyes shut. The woman also removed her hat but stared at their opponent. You two are Yahiko and Konan, the 2 from that Akatsuki group I dealt with a few years ago. How are you still alive? The man asked. You were right, Hanzo. Yahiko did die. He killed himself using the kunai you gave me to save Konan. And I died as well that moment. I had been known as Uzumaki Nagato, and from that moment I, Pain, was born. I am a god of peace who will tear down this shinobi world that tears itself apart in the name of vengeance, just as I will kill you to avenge my friend and to end your tyranny over a Megakure and the Land of Rain. I will strike the pain of loss deep into this world. All will know the same pain and they shall throw away the concept of war. I will end the cycle of hatred and vengeance, and it starts here today with your death. Pain declared as he opened his eyes, showing the rippled, purple designed. Bold words coming from a walking corpse. So who are the rest of these soon-to-be corpses? Hanzo asked. At the moment, the other 5 removed their hats and opened their eyes. They were all the same rippled, purple design. Pain answered alongside the other men, as one. We are the power of the Sage of 6 Paths reborn. We are the 6 Paths of Pain, and we shall be the end of you, Hanzo the Salamander. A battle to determine the fate aim in the Land of Rain was about to begin, and the result would determine the course of the elemental nations for the next few decades. And that's it for part 2 of What If Naruto Was Raised by Team Minato. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more Naruto What If adventures. Comment below your favorite moment and what you want to see in part 3. Thanks for watching, see you in the next video.